we're jumping into the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. We're on the chapter titled With the Devotees at Dakshineshwar, Part 1, page 249. And here comes Shrikant. And we're on the date Sunday, June 17th, 1883. It's the bottom two sentences on that page for everybody to get on board as we go forward. All right. Sunday, June 17th, 1883. Sri Ramakrishna was resting in his room in the temple garden at Dakshineshwar. It was afternoon. Adhar and M arrived and saluted the master. A tantric devotee also came in. Rakal, Hazra, and Ramlal were staying with Sri Ramakrishna. The master to the devotees: why shouldn't one be able to attain spirituality, living the life of a householder? But it is extremely difficult. Sages like Janaka entered the world after attaining knowledge, but still the world is a place of terror. Even a detached householder has to be careful. Once Janaka bent down his head at the sight of a Bhairavi. He shrank from seeing a woman. The Bhairavi said to him, Janaka, I see that you have not yet attained knowledge. You still differentiate between man and woman. If you move about in a room filled with soot, you will soil your body, however slightly, no matter how clever you may be. I have seen householder devotees filled with spiritual emotion while performing their daily worship, wearing their silk clothes. They maintain that attitude even until they take their refreshment after the worship. But afterward, they become their old selves again. They display their rajasic and tamasic natures. So he's talking, first he starts off with reassuring, right? He's like, well, of course, why couldn't a householder? You know, they divide the paths in two. You got the monastic practitioner and the household practitioner. The monastic renounces the world and doesn't marry and doesn't have friends and all of that. And the householder, gets married and carries on and supports society. And so both are paths that lead to the divine. It's just really a matter of where a person is at and what techniques they're going to use to arrive at their realization. And so the master is reassuring you, why would you think that you couldn't realize God as a householder? But he also doesn't want you to undermine to underplay, I guess, the difficulty of it. And he really describes what that difficulty is. It's one of the biggest differences that I have found about living in a monastery and not living in a monastery, is that in the monastery, you get up and you do your practice and you do your meditation and you come to a certain place of, whatever, wherever you are in spiritual life, a sense of bliss, a sense of devotion, a sense of sweetness. And that can last a good part of the day because you don't have a boss, you don't have the cranky woman at the front desk, you don't have the bus ride or the commute to get to work, and you're living in a temple, so you've got pictures of God everywhere, and all of your duties are around your spiritual life, and you're dealing with devotees, you're living with swamis and other novices. And so you get a huge advantage as a monastic if you take advantage of it. It's easy to be a monastic and just coast along and not take advantage of it, which is the danger of being of the monastic path. But what happens is that because you get all of that support around you, your moods of your godly moods, your spiritual inspirations can stay with you a lot longer. And then when you sit to do your next meditation, you actually start from a higher place and move up. Whereas I find that before I had become a monk and was doing my practice, that just like you mentioned, I could have that wonderful time in the morning and enjoy my breakfast and, getting ready to go to the office. But by the time I got to the office, after that bus ride and, saying hello to all the people at work and checking in with my inbox, and by the time all that was done, boy, that mood, that meditation was a memory. I was like, oh, that was hours ago. And I was right there doing everything. And that's what he's talking about here. He says, that's that's the challenge of the householder path, is that you've got to find your own ways of maintaining your spiritual focus, even in a world where nobody else is. And that's both a good and bad. It's good because, boy, you're going to build some spiritual muscle doing that. You're going to grow quite a bit. You're going to be very flexible in your spiritual life as well by mastering that. But it's bad, or it's hard, because you don't get to enjoy the bliss, and you have to do it. You can't just succumb to being the way everybody else is during the day. And so that's why I'm always saying to create games in your spiritual life that bring your mind back to the beloved. Just trips and tricks and trips and tips. I kept wanting to say trips and ticks, but tricks and tips for tricks and tips for maintaining your spiritual life. One of the, and there's many ways of doing that, to make a decision that every hour on the hour you're going to do 10 japam on your mala beads, or, every, whenever you put something in an outbox, you're going to make it a shrine and offer whatever's going into your outbox to the mother first, to the beloved first, and then you put it in the outbox. All these little tricks that we can do. Put a picture of, your chosen ideal in your cubicle, whatever they allow you to do at work. Some offices are different, but just to come up with ways of remembering the truth and not getting caught up in the delusions of a world that seems very real around us, when the one reality is within. And so to keep the mind indrawn, even though you're doing all of your work externally. And it can be done, but it's a challenge. And he says here, sattva begets bhakti. So sattva, the world is composed of three elements. I could call them elements in some sense: rajas, tamas, and sattva. And rajas is that person that can't sit still. It's got to always be busy, always hyper, always going, always doing, loves action. And the person who's tamasic is the absolute opposite. The guy, the lump on the log, you can't get him to move for your life. He's just doing nothing. A sense of inertia, can't get any momentum happening. So there's that aspect. And then there's sattva. Sattva is kind of a balance between rajas and tamas. It's when those two are balanced properly, you come to a state of equanimity, a state of calmness. And that's called sattva. And sattva is what allows you to have devotion. Sattva is what allows you to sit in that devotional nature, that love of God, knowing the love of God and expressing your love for God. So he said sattva begets bhakti. Even bhakti has three aspects. So even your devotion to God has these same three aspects to it. It can be sattva devotion, it can be rajasic devotion, it can be tamasic devotion. And Ramakrishna talks about them at different times. Like the sattva devotion, that's just the person who's very calm and very focused and mindful in his meditation, very present with the divine. You've got the rajasic person who's doing the flowers and cleaning up the shrine and cleaning the blinds and polishing the brass and just doing all these things. Does the ritual worship, is really into the ritual worship, very active. And then the sattvic, then the the tamasic devotee, is like, give me my realization now. I want it now. Just very kind of not worried about the fineries around the edges in their relationship with the divine. Very straightforward with God, very demanding. I want my inheritance now. I don't want to have to wait for it. Give it to me. If you don't do this for me, God, I'm not going to meditate all day today. So little things like that would be tamasic devotion. The sattva of bhakti is pure sattva. So that's real equanimity, real calmness. When a devotee acquires it, he doesn't direct his mind to anything but God. right? Just he's had that inner experience of the name of God and feels that wonderful bliss, that wonderful inner peace, and just not interested in being pulled out of that. Just only wants to be reminded of that, wants to stay in that space. He doesn't want to direct his mind to anything but God. He pays only as much attention to his body as is absolutely necessary for its protection, right? Because he knows himself not to be the body, but yet he knows that it's the temple of the divine. So he takes care of it, but only to the degree that's necessary. You're not going to find him, working out to get that little, crease in his abdomen stronger or more defined or whatnot. He's just taking care of it just to the extent that he cannot think about it, not just to keep it from getting sick. His one aim is to maintain this thought of the presence within always. He pays only as much attention to his body as is absolutely necessary for its protection. But a Paramahamsa, this is someone who's, is a monastic, but also a very spiritual person, a person who has touched some heights. Ramakrishna was a Paramahamsa. But a Paramahamsa is beyond the three gunas. So he floats above all three of these elements of the creation, this rajas, tamas. They don't affect him. Why? Because he has established his identity as not being body, not being mind. And so all of the, fluttery demands of the body, all of the fluttery demands of the mind, and all of those three different states don't affect him. They can't reach him because he is established in his self, separate and apart from the body, being the container of all of the creation, that he's not a particular in his mind. So a Paramahamsa is beyond the three gunas. Though they exist in him, yet they are practically non-existent. Like a child, he is not under the control of any of the gunas. That is why Paramahamsas allow small children to come near them in order to assume their nature. How spontaneous and innocent a child is. There's no calculation in a child, usually. And so you can see their sweetness. The Paramahamsa, highly spiritual person, likes to have children around because that is, like Jesus says, unless you become like a child, you cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. You have to have that aloofness to the workings of the world, the workings of the body, the demands and feelings and emotions and hungers and desires that the body-mind presents to you. You have to be able to float above them and to be like a child, to not be affected. So the way that looks to someone being like a child means the child gets angry, but it only lasts a few seconds, and then they're back to playing again like they were before. Nothing sticks to them. They're free. And so that's the ideal. And so one of the signs of realization, one of the ways that a realized person will look is like a child. That same spontaneous playfulness and freedom of being. Paramahamsas may not lay things up, okay, which means they shouldn't store anything for the future. The Paramahamsa at that state of spirituality, they don't have a concept. I mean, they have a concept, but they're not moved by the concept of past and future. They're present, fully present in the moment. And so God is God is providing for them in real time. And so they're because of that and that faith in the divine taking care of them, are not supposed to lay up anything for the future. They don't save any money. They don't prepare for retirement. They don't do any of these things because for them, there is only the now, only the isness of being. And so, but then he says here, but this rule does not apply to householders. They must provide for their families. And so householders are allowed and expected to save up and to provide for their own retirement, for their family's education and well-being, taking care of the children and the grandchildren. And then if there's more left over, then they take care of, the temple and the monastery and see to the needs of those folks. And then if they still have more money, then they're responsible to the society at large. going out and giving money to the poor and making sure that everyone is being taken care of. So that's the path of the householder, very important path. And they're interlinked. You can't have a monk without a householder. And a householder is going to have a very difficult time in spiritual life without any monks. And so they require each other. And so both the respect is there for each other. A tantric devotee. Is a Paramahamsa aware of virtue and vice? Master. Keshav Sen also asked that question. I said to him, if I explain that to you, then you won't be able to keep your society together. In that case, we'd better stop here, said Keshav. So Keshav was in charge of that organization called the Brahmo Samaj, which was kind of like in my estimation, the Brahmo Samaj was sort of a reforming of Hinduism to be practiced and looked a little bit more like Christianity. You know, they had their Sunday meetings and they had their lectures and they had their singing and whatnot like that. They believed only in the formless God. They didn't believe in any of the idols and thought that was wrong. So they had that approach. And Ramakrishna was very close to Keshav Sen and had a great deal of respect for him. So Keshav says, do you believe in virtue and vice, good and evil? And Ramakrishna tells him, if I explain that to you, you're not going to be able to keep your organization together because this is going to take you beyond that. You're not going to be able to function in that way. Do you know the significance of virtue and vice? Ramakrishna asks. A Paramahamsa sees that it is God who gives us evil tendencies as well as good tendencies. Haven't you noticed that there are both sweet and bitter fruits? Some trees give sweet fruit and some bitter or sour. God has made the mango tree, which yields sweet fruit, but God has also made the hod plum, which yields a sour fruit. Tantric. Yes, sir, that is true. On the hilltop, one sees extensive rose gardens reaching as far as the eye can see. Master. The Paramahamsa realizes that all these, good and bad, virtue and vice, real and unreal, are only the glories of God's Maya. But these are very deep thoughts. One realizing this cannot keep an organization together or anything like that, right? Because at that level, you don't see the duality because you don't identify as a particular. So you see both sides of the coin at the same time, simultaneously. You understand that the world as it is exists, is as it is. It doesn't have a value until it meets the divine in you, based on where you're at in your spiritual life. And so we also can learn from this that evil is not always evil and good is not always good. It really depends on the person perceiving it and the identity of the person perceiving it. Yes.
Is that what is meant by from the hilltop you will see only the rose garden? Is that what is meant by that?
Yeah, I think so. That from the hilltop you get the sweeping view of everything. And everything is everything. You're not in any one of the gardens experiencing any one of anything. You're seeing the expanse. You're seeing the divine in all things, right? But this is it's a very high level of consciousness, of awareness. And the reason the master is not really jumping into it and giving us all the details is because we're not there. And this can undo a lot of our helpful training if we jump to that idea without realizing it. So if we take a philosophical idea that's beyond our experience and start living according to that philosophical idea without doing the work and attaining that level of consciousness, it won't work and it will mess you up. So that's why he's not jumping into it real deeply here.
Thank you.
Yes. And the whole reason that he didn't want Keshav Sen, because Keshav's karma was to create that organization and to run that organization. That was his service and his devotion and his purpose. And so the master didn't want that undone. So good and evil are relative and they belong to Maya. They're not inherent realities. Once you realize God, there is no longer good and evil in the world. There's only isness, only the presence, and everything is as it should be. Because you've realized the world to be dreamlike, that it is God who has become everyone and everything. So no one is being hurt except for God, and no one is hurting God except for God. And that it's like a dream. You wake up in the morning, there's no more concern about what was happening in the dream, because you just say to yourself, it was a dream. And so everything resolves. It's unimportant. It was only important from within the dream, right? So he says the Paramahamsa realizes all these good and bad, virtue, vice, real and unreal, are only the glories of God's Maya. But these are very deep thoughts. One realizing this cannot keep an organization together or anything like that. Tantric, but the law of karma exists, doesn't it? Master, that also is true. Good produces good and bad produces bad. Don't you get the hot taste if you eat chilies? But these are all God's Leela, his play. So he's really making the point, understand that yes, these things seem to exist. And while we believe ourselves to be a body, while we believe ourselves to be real as an individual, then good and evil is real for us. And it's important to pay attention to virtue and to vice, and to try and to cultivate our virtues and discourage our vices, because these are all like tumblers in a padlock. You know, they're what hold us bound into our body, into our experience, into our life. Our karma is stored in our mind. It's our own self that holds us to our karma, to our sense of right and wrong, the sense of guilt, the sense of shame, all of these things that manipulate us. They belong to us, and we experience them because we believe in them, because we believe ourselves to be the body, we believe ourselves to be the doer, and that creates a sense of responsibility. And that is egoism. That is Maya. That is the story of our life, the story of our personality, the story of our being. And as long as we believe those things to be true, they are. And we are beholden to them. We have to move through them before we can ignore them, right? We have to move through them. So he says, but the law of karma exists, doesn't it? And he says, yes, good produces good, bad produces bad. The tantric, then what is the way for us? We shall have to reap the result of our past karma, shall we not? The master, that may be so. Okay, he doesn't say yes. He doesn't say it's an absolute. He says, yes, that may be so. But it is different with the devotees of God. Listen to this song. O mind, you do not know how to farm. Fallow lies the field of your life. If you had only worked it well, how rich a harvest you might reap. Hedge it about with Kali's name. If you would keep your harvest safe, this is the stoutest hedge of all, for death himself cannot come near it. Sooner or later will dawn the day when you must forfeit your precious field. Gather, O mind, what fruit you may. Sow for your seed the holy name of God that your guru has given to you. Faithfully water it with love. And if you should find the task too hard, call upon Ram Prasad for help. So you see what he's saying here. Yes, you have to experience. Yes.
Is this the song that you and Greg sang one time?
Yes, Greg wrote us. Greg put this to music. You put many of these to music, yeah. Maybe Zoom is so terrible with music. Otherwise, I'd encourage him to sing it. But Zoom can't.
I will put it on the WhatsApp. I have it. I think I have saved up.
Oh, nice. That would be great.
Yeah,
it's a great song. So this is the advantage of the path of bhakti, you see. This is why Ramakrishna says in this day and age, bhakti or devotion is the fastest and most effective path for reaching God. Because God, your relationship with the divine, the chanting of the divine name, affects your karma. And so this is a way around karma, around having to go through and pay your price through devotion, through the grace of the divine, through filling yourself with the sweet atmosphere of the name of God, will rescue you from a lot of the bad tendencies of your mind, will buffer you from reacting, snap reactions to the world and to the needs of the body, and will elevate your mind. And by thinking of God, you're always thinking of your real nature. And so you are evaporating yourself into a higher state of awareness, so that you don't have to slog through all of your karma, right? And so it's in devotion, it's the love of God, the grace of the divine, that releases us from our karma, that releases us from our mistakes. He's saying again, I have securely blocked the way by which the king of death will come. Henceforth, all my doubts and fears are set to naught forever. Shiva himself is standing guard at the 9 doorways of my house. So that's the body with the 9 gates, the mouth, nostrils, eyes, ears, etc. And so you see here that if you are doing the path of bhakti, of devotion, then your highest ideal protects you, stands guard. That name of God is what prevents your mind from wandering into unhelpful directions. That name of God is what inspires you out of unhelpful moods. That name of God is what gives you a pleasant sensation of being, so that you're not connected to the body, not looking for your pleasures through the body, through the senses. Your inner world is your delight, through that inner shrine that we talk about, that inner presence of pure love, of pure wisdom and being. Shiva himself is standing guard at the 9 doorways of my house, which has 1 pillar for support and 3 ropes to secure it. The Lord has made his dwelling place, and the thousand petaled lotus flower within the head, and comforts me with never ceasing care. Right? And so that pillar for support is the absolute unchanging within you, Brahman, as it were, and your access to Brahman through the shrine of the heart. So that's available in you. And the 3 ropes he's got there, those are the 3 gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas, in the body, that we have to always maintain that balance between action and inertia, and to remain in that state of equanimity, which is sattva. And through that, we find our release from karma, and have our realization, knowing that we are that divine spirit, the container within which everything happens, and we are the dreamer and not the dreamed in reality. The master continued, anyone who dies in Benares, whether a Brahmin or a prostitute, will become Shiva. When a man sheds tears in the name of Hari or Kali or Rama, then he has no further need of the sandhya and other rites. All actions drop away of themselves. The fruit of action does not touch him. Right? So this, by knowing your true nature as not the doer, this is what releases you from the bondage of your karma. This is when the duality begins to become a unity, and you're no longer controlled by Maya, by the delusion of being the doer in the world, and owning your actions and collecting your karmic debt and holding yourself responsible to it in your mind. So the fruit of action does not touch him. Again, the master sang, as is a man's meditation, so is his feeling of love. All right, so that shows you, gives you a big clue there. As is your meditation, as is your ability to still the mind, to maintain the presence of God, the thought of God. To that extent, you're going to have that feeling of love, that feeling of bliss within yourself. And as is a man's feeling of love, so is his gain. Right? So the farther down, the more you practice your meditation, your japam, the more you're going to feel and kindle that inner divine love, that wonderful feeling that most of us encounter first through our boyfriends and girlfriends in elementary school. That wonderful time you first hold your girlfriend's hand or something, that's love. That's the presence of God. We confuse it with the presence of our girlfriend or boyfriend, but all love is the presence of God, the presence of the divine, which is a wonderful secret, because then you can enjoy the love of all of the world, but you abstract out the objects. Understand that the objects are not the cause of this love. They're just reflecting this love back to you. You know, something about that person or something about that experience reminds you of the divine, and that love is kindled within you. And if you're under delusion, you believe it came from your boyfriend, girlfriend, or experience. But as a knower, you know that that was the presence, that all love is the presence of God, the kindling of that divine love within. And so as is a man's feeling of this love, so is his gain or her gain. And faith is the root of all. Faith, that knowing those things which have come into the world with you, that could not have been taught to you by the world, being established in those things, the things that cannot be proven, you know, because the world didn't teach them to you. They came in with you, like we talk about this quite a bit, your unconditioned love, you know, requires faith, because there's nothing in the world that can teach you of unconditioned love. Your immortality, there's nothing in the world that can teach you about immortality. It doesn't exist in the world. These are concepts that we brought in with us by our nature. And having faith means we hold these things as part of ourself, as part of our own self, and build our life on these understandings. You know, even though we can't prove them using the physical world, because they don't exist in the physical world. The physical world can only point to them, can only what do you call that? Infer them, right? So your immortality, the idea of infinity, any ideal, anything of perfection requires faith, because there's nothing in the world that reflects perfection. So all of these concepts, we'll call them concepts, all of these names of God, that's how I like to look at them, that we bring into the world with us, that we couldn't have learned from the world, all of these ideas we couldn't have garnered from the world, that these are the truths we hold inherently to be true. And so we build our life on that. Faith is the root of all. If in the nectar lake of Mother Kali's feet my mind remains immersed, of little use are worship, oblations, and sacrifice. Right? So the whole point of worship and oblations and sacrifice is to keep your mind in the presence of the divine, and to build on that sense of love, to open the gates in the ego, so that love can express through it, and it can diminish, it can get out of the way. And so when that is perfected, when you are constantly in the presence of the beloved, then there's not so much need for these offerings and worships and pujas and rituals and whatnot. But they are there kind of as a rope thrown down from God for you to climb up. But once you've gotten to the heights, these things are no longer necessary. He sang another song, "Why should I go to Ganga or Gaya or Kashi or Kanchi or Prabhas, so long as I can breathe my last with Kali's name upon my lips?" Right? So he's saying the whole point of all of those things, going on pilgrimage to all those places, he said, why should I bother with that when I can just chant the Lord's name? And then I become holy. The place that I sit becomes holy. I don't have to go visit these places of pilgrimage. I myself become the temple and the inspiration and the mood and the atmosphere. My own temple within, I have charged with the love of God, and have moved into with my attention and my awareness. And now I'm established there, and I watch the world and watch the life that's being lived from that vantage point, from that place of eternity, from that place of timelessness, from that place of contentment and freedom. Then he said, when a man merges himself in God, he can no longer retain wicked or sinful tendencies, right? Because, well, what are wicked and sinful tendencies? Those are the things that we desire and long for when we're identified with a body mind, right? So sinful tendencies are when your mind is in a bad mood and you obey it. Sinful tendencies are when your body is hungry and you grab the food first, or you push someone out of the way to get your section, your thing. It's when you assume that you are limited, that you are a body and a mind, and you act accordingly. Those are sinful tendencies. Those are the things that make us wicked, where we act in our own localized self-interest. But when we are in that higher state where we know ourselves to be in everyone, then our concern for ourself is our concern for every self. We're no longer identified and attached to this particular. We see ourselves everywhere. And so when you are in that space of knowing the divine, seeing the divine everywhere and in yourself, then you're not being driven by the needs of the body, by the demands of a mind. You're not, your ego isn't determining your action, which means you can't be offended. You can't be hurt. You can't be angry. You can't be jealous. They're just not possible unless the ego is in charge. And so for a person who has merged himself in God, who has come to know his divine nature as the witness, he can no longer retain wicked or sinful tendencies. Tantric says, you have said rightly that he keeps only the knowledge of ego. Master, yes, he keeps only the knowledge of ego, the devotee ego, the servant ego, and the good ego. His wicked ego disappears. You see what he's saying there? He's saying in another place, he's talking about this egoism, this sense of an individual self. He says it's extremely hard to get rid of, and the ordinary person really can't get rid of it entirely. He says it's like a willow tree. You chop it down and you go out the next morning and there's already branches sprouting up again from it overnight. And so the ego is like that. We may be able to reduce it and diminish its effect on us, but it comes right back again. So he says for the normal person, the best that we can do is subjugate that ego, express that egoism through a love of God, being a devotee of God, being a servant of God. He gives you these different options here. The knowledge ego, so the ego that knows about God, that knows the scriptures, that can chant the mantras. The devotee ego, the ego that's in love with God. So you keep your sense of self, your individual sense of self, but you see yourself as a lover of God. And so you turn your life into an offering. The servant ego, God is too great for you to have a relationship with, but you are his servant or her servant. And so everything that you do is in service to the beloved, to the divine. So we train our ego to be a servant of the Lord. And the good ego, the ego that's just attached to being a good human being, to loving and nurturing, to being compassionate, to serving and taking care of others. Then his wicked ego disappears. So Thakur says, if you can't get rid of the ego completely, which is what the Jnani is trying to do, then you can take through the path of devotion. You can channel your ego into different directions so that it won't harm you. It won't increase your delusion. You can use your ego to reduce your delusion, right? By identifying as a devotee, as a servant, as a lover, as a child of God. The Tantric says, today you have destroyed many of our doubts. Master, all doubts disappear when one realizes the self. If you just but once touch that divine nature within, it will be like a shock, the current that runs within your body is not electricity, it's love. And when you touch the bare wire, right within the shrine of the heart, you've got a little exposure of that bare wire in there. And you touch that just once in your meditation. And even for a split second, it'll be like this jolt of pure love punches you from the shrine. You're like, wow, what was that? And then you spend the rest of your days trying to find it again. Because for that moment, you get that little bit of a flavor of what this direct experience of God is. And then nothing else is interesting to you. Nothing else is interesting. All doubts disappear when one realizes the self. Assume the tamasic aspect of bhakti, say with force. So he's describing this, the bhakti or the devotion of inertia here. What's it look like? Say with force, what? I've uttered the names of Rama and Kali. How can I be in bondage anymore? How can I be affected by the law of karma? And he sings a song. So this is the tamasic, that how dare you? I've chanted the name of God. How can you call me a sinner? This so that's that tamasic bhakti. So the master sings a song. If only I can pass away, repeating Durga's name. How can you then, O Blessed One, withhold from me deliverance, wretched though I may be? Right? So you make your demands of God. You're like, look, I'm not a beggar. I'm an heir. You created me. I didn't do this. I'm here. You owe me salvation, and I want it. So this is that tamasic idea. O Blessed One, how can you withhold from me deliverance, wretched though I may be? I may have stolen a drink of wine, or killed a child unborn, or slain a woman or a cow, or even caused a Brahmin's death. But though it all be true, nothing of this can make me feel the least uneasiness. For through the power of your sweet name, my wretched soul may still aspire even to Brahmanhood. That's faith. That's relationship with the divine. It's like that's when you fully accept that grace, and know that it's no longer a measurement of what you do and how you act and behaviors, but it is because of the love of God for you, and it is because of the grace of the divine that saves you, that pulls you out of your dilemma. Then you can talk like this. You can have this kind of faith, and move mountains with that. The master continued, faith, faith, faith. Once a guru said to his pupil, Rama alone has become everything. When a dog began to eat the pupil's bread, he said to it, O Rama, wait a little, I shall butter your bread. Such was his faith in the words of his guru. So you see, this is what bhakti is. This is what devotion is, seeing God everywhere. Your beloved has become everything. So the dog comes down, jumps up and grabs the piece of toast off your plate. You don't react to the dog as a dog who's stolen your toast. You realize that was the Lord, and the Lord has taken your toast, and you offer to butter it for him. Oh, here, don't take it. Don't drop it. Here, let me put some butter on that for you. And you see how we change through devotion. How we move closer to that divinely inspired ego, where we still feel our separation, but we see the beloved everywhere. We serve him in everything as a practice. Worthless people do not have any faith. They always doubt, but doubts do not disappear completely until one realizes the self. This doubting, it's important to understand the nature of doubt. You have to be careful inside, because doubts can be healthy. Wanting to know the truth, like Vivekananda, wouldn't just believe something because the master said it. He wanted to know it for himself. He wanted to double check and make sure it was true. And quite often he tested the master himself to see if the master was true, to see if the master was real. So that kind of doubt can be healthy. When you're looking for truth, doubt is healthy. But if you're using doubt to remain to not be responsible for something, if you are nurturing a doubt in order to keep some license for a vice that you enjoy or that you love, or a behavior that you like, or a sense of self that you like, then that kind of doubt is the doubt of a worthless person. It's like you're not going to be able to grow. because you're using doubt to cripple yourself, to cripple your development. So if you're using doubt to find truth and to investigate and to work harder, fine. It can be a helpful tool. But if you're using it to give yourself wiggle room, or to not be responsible to the truth, or to not change a behavior, or to change a way of being, then you're getting yourself into some trouble. You're stunting your growth. In genuine love of God, there is no desire. Only through such love does one speedily realize God, attainment of supernatural powers, and so on. And so on. These are desires. Krishna once said to Arjuna, "Friend, you cannot realize God if you acquire even one of the 8 supernatural powers. They will only add a little to your power." Right? So he's just saying here, in genuine love of God, there's no desire. You don't require anything of God. You don't require anything at all. In this knowledge of God and genuine love of God, there's no desire. It's good enough. It's just being in the company of the presence. That's all you need. That's all you want. There's nothing more for you than that. And only through that kind of love, that love that doesn't demand anything of God, so that God can treat you like a rag doll, and you accept it, because you know somehow, though you may not understand, you know somehow that that action from the divine is always for your benefit, that this moment is perfect for you, whether it's a moment of pain or a moment of ecstasy. Your faith in the love of God is in God as love, in God as unconditioned love, in God as the source of all grace. When you come to know that, when you know it, not just as a mental truth, but when you experience it, to know that God is the source of this divinity, this wonderful presence, then desires disappear, demands disappear, and anything else is not helpful. Even all of the spiritual gifts that you can find, the ability to fly, or the ability to become really small, or the ability to inhabit another body, all of these different things that are mentioned in different scriptures. He says, you can't realize God if you acquire even one of those. They're all distractions. So this is important in your practice. When you're doing your meditations and you touch something like, ooh, that touch of love, or ooh, that light, I saw something, or whatnot like that. If you let that become the point of your meditation, if you sit down the next day and you go looking for that, if you go looking for something in your meditation, you're on a treadmill. You're not getting anywhere, right? Meditation is about an opening to what is. It's not an acquisition. It's not going to get. Meditation is an acceptance of the presence within you, an acceptance of a grace that allows you to touch it, though you may never have deserved it. An allowance, an acceptance of an unconditioned love, so that you can let go of feeling like you need to earn or acquire or desire or get something. So meditation is sitting and assuming your realization, enjoying your realization before you have it. So this is what meditation is, like that. It's not the quest for something that you'll get in some idealized day in the future. It's sitting to know or to see that you are in fact already realized, that it is only your ego delusion that has kept you from experiencing that, from knowing that. And so you sit in that awareness. The Tantric: Sir, why don't the rituals of Tantra bear fruit nowadays? Master: It is because people cannot practice them with absolute correctness and devotion. In conclusion, the Master said, the love of God is the one essential thing. A true lover of God has nothing to fear, nothing to worry about. He is aware that the Divine Mother knows everything. The cat handles the mouse one way, but its own kitten in a very different way. So faith is the root of all, this knowledge, right? And this God that we're talking about, God is love. And so anywhere that you manifest love, you're manifesting divinity, you're manifesting God. You know, in life, if you don't believe in God, you know, then you're using the wrong word. What is there to believe in God? What does that mean? We don't even know what it means, because most of us don't even know what God means. What does that word mean? And so I always plug in the synonyms, you know, ask somebody if they believe in love. That's the real question. Do you believe in love? Well, how can you not believe in love? Love is self-evident. The whole world is chasing it. The whole world is trying to manufacture it. You know, the whole world is being motivated by it. And so that's our faith. Sit there and realize love. Realize love. You use one of the other synonyms, beauty. God is beauty. God is truth. God is integrity. You know, God is strength. All these synonyms of the name of God. So this is where we place our faith, in these infinite words. You know, these words that as we contemplate them, they expand. They keep getting bigger. Names of God can never be defined. They're always pointers at something that just increases the more you stare at it, the more you contemplate it. So all of the things in this world that you know without having to be taught. You know, all of us know love when we see it. All of us know beauty when we see it. All of us know truth when we hear it. These are all names of God. They are things that are part and parcel of our being. And so have faith in that. Accept that. You know, faith is accepting that, opening to it. Yes. Faith is just saying yes. Yes to love. Yes to an unconditioned love. Yes to grace. Yes to beauty. Yes to truth. And to sit in that meditation and allow yourself to be loved. Allow yourself to be inspired. Allow yourself to be forgiven. Allow yourself to be strong. Allow yourself to be true. Give yourself permission to let go of the particulars that you're holding on to, that can't deliver what they promise. And this is how we find what is. Time we have here. Oh, it's 8:02. Good time to stop.